The Gamma-7 Galactic Distribution Center buzzed with activity, the air thick with the scent of metal and machinery working in tandem. An orchestra of sounds filled the space, the whir of conveyor belts, the beeping of loading docks, and the occasional shout of a colleague trying to be heard over the din. Max Carter, a humble maintenance worker, navigated the chaos with a practiced ease, his worn tool belt hanging heavily at his waist. He had been at this facility for years, tirelessly ensuring that everything ran smoothly, but today felt different. As he ducked beneath a low-hanging pipe, an urgent alarm blared through the building, piercing the usual noise like a knife. Max's heart raced. He had heard that sound before. It meant that something was seriously wrong. He glanced around at the faces of his co-workers, their brows furrowed in concern. The tension was palpable, and Max felt the pressure weighing on his shoulders. If he didn't act quickly, there could be a catastrophic meltdown. Rushing towards the control panel that had triggered the alarm, Max noticed a small crowd gathering, their eyes wide with fear and curiosity. The panel flickered ominously, buzzing with electrical energy, warning lights flashing red. Max slipped through the throng, his mind racing to recall the last time he had encountered such an issue. It was a few months back, and that situation had nearly spiraled out of control. He remembered the frantic calls for help, the sweat beading on his forehead as he scrambled to stabilize the situation. He couldn't let that happen again. Max! You're needed over here, called out Jenna, a fellow maintenance worker, her voice barely audible over the cacophony. She was gesturing wildly at the panel. It's getting worse. I see it. Max replied, his voice steady despite the rising panic in his chest. He reached the control panel, the screen displaying a mess of error codes that made his stomach drop. Taking a deep breath, he leaned closer, inspecting the wires and circuits that sprawled within the panel's casing. The smell of burning plastic wafted up, intensifying his urgency. Stay back, everyone, he shouted, waving his hand to clear a little space around him. The crowd hesitated, eyes glued to him as if he were some kind of hero ready to save the day. Max felt their anticipation, but he also sensed the weight of their expectations. He was just a maintenance worker, and the stakes were higher than ever. If he failed, the consequences could be devastating. He focused on the panel, which flickered under his gaze, seemingly mocking his every move. Max had learned the ins and outs of this equipment over the years, but today, the technical jargon and flashing lights seemed to taunt him. The alarms continued to shriek, a relentless reminder that time was running out. I need to find the source of this malfunction, he muttered to himself, pushing down the rising tide of fear. Just then, an announcement crackled over the intercom, the voice of the facility manager booming through the air. Attention all personnel. We are experiencing a critical failure in Sector B. Please evacuate immediately. Panic surged through the crowd, and people began to scatter in all directions. Max felt his heart race even faster. He knew he couldn't abandon his post. He had to fix this. Max! You can't handle this alone. Jenna shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. We need to get out. No! I can do this, he insisted, not turning to look at her. His hands moved instinctively, reaching for the tools clanking in his belt. I just need a moment. He could feel the eyes of his co-workers on him, a mixture of fear and hope. It was a burden he had carried before, but this time felt heavier, more significant. He took a deep breath, steadying himself against the mounting pressure. The buzzing of the panel became a constant hum in his ears, and he focused on the task at hand. With a steady hand, he opened the panel, revealing a chaotic mess of wires, circuit boards, and components. The sight was overwhelming, but he had seen worse. He just needed to concentrate. As he inspected the wiring, memories of his training sessions flooded back. His mentor, a grizzled veteran of the maintenance world, had drilled the importance of remaining calm under pressure into him. Always trust your instincts, Max, the old man had said. You've got what it takes to make it through. Those words echoed in his mind as he recalled the countless times he had faced challenges that seemed insurmountable. He could do this. Max began to isolate the components, checking each one for signs of malfunction. The alarms continued to blare, but he pushed through the noise, focusing on the task before him. He felt the sweat trickling down his back, the metallic tang of fear in the air as he reached for a particularly frayed wire. Carefully, he touched it, feeling the heat emanating from it. This has to be it, he thought, his mind racing ahead as he formulated a plan. With a quick glance at the control panel's schematic, he knew he might have to improvise. He could use an old component from the storage room, one he had seen lying around just days before. It was a gamble, but he couldn't allow hesitation to creep in. If he didn't act now, they could lose everything. As he prepared to head to storage, he felt a surge of determination. If you're enjoying this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel, he thought to himself, realizing that he needed to channel his focus. This was more than just a job, it was about saving the people around him, keeping them safe. With a nod to himself, he turned and sprinted towards the storage area, pushing through the chaos that enveloped the facility. The alarms continued to sound, a constant reminder of the urgency of the moment. Max ran, his heart pounding, and the world around him faded into a blur of colors and sounds. He could do this. He had to. As he burst into the storage room, the familiar scent of old machinery and dust filled his nostrils. It was a chaotic space, filled with outdated equipment and forgotten tools. Max scanned the shelves, searching for the component he needed. The adrenaline coursing through his veins sharpened his focus as he retraced his steps, remembering exactly where he had seen the part. He spotted it, a dusty circuit board nestled between two larger components. With a rush of relief, he grabbed it, feeling the weight of hope in his hands. Time was of the essence, and Max raced back to the control panel, the alarms still blaring in the background, urging him forward. The stakes had never been higher, and he was determined to succeed. Max crouched beside the control panel, his heart racing as the alarms continued to blare, a relentless reminder of the impending crisis. The chaotic noise echoed in his ears, mixing with the hum of machinery and the rising sense of urgency in the Galactic Distribution Center. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, and it was almost suffocating. This wasn't just any malfunction, it was a potential meltdown. With sweat trickling down his brow, he knew he had to act fast. As he began to troubleshoot, vivid memories flooded back to him, moments from his training that felt like lifetimes ago. He recalled a harrowing incident where a similar malfunction had escalated into a disaster, one that had left a lasting mark on his career and his self-worth. Back then, he had been just a rookie, overwhelmed and terrified. But that experience had forged him into the worker he was today, the one who felt the pulse of machinery and could diagnose problems in the blink of an eye. "I can do this," he whispered to himself, bolstered by the memory of his mentor's encouraging words. "Keep calm, Max. You've got this," he repeated, grounding himself as he focused on the panel before him. The intricate web of wires and circuits seemed daunting, but he had faced worse. He took a breath, the metallic tang of the air filling his lungs as he opened the panel, revealing a chaotic mess of components. The faint smell of burnt plastic wafted up, and he grimaced, knowing that something was definitely wrong. A flash of panic gripped him as he saw the flickering lights and the erratic beeping of the monitor. He quickly grabbed his toolkit, feeling the comforting weight of the well-worn tools in his hands. The alarms blared louder, drowning out his thoughts. He had to isolate the malfunction, and fast. "Focus, Max," he muttered, zeroing in on the task at hand. As he began to examine the wiring, he felt a deep sense of connection to the machine. Each wire told a story, each component held secrets. He felt like a detective unraveling a mystery, and he was determined to solve it. If you're enjoying this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel, he thought to himself, realizing how much he needed to channel his focus. This wasn't just a job, it was a life and death situation for everyone in the facility. He moved methodically, checking each wire for signs of damage. The alarms were still screaming, but he pushed through the noise, focusing on the task before him. He could feel the sweat pooling in the small of his back, the heat of the moment palpable. Suddenly, his hands froze over one particularly frayed wire, and he felt his heart skip a beat. This has to be it, he thought, recalling the warnings from his training about overheating components. Max knew that if this wire was the problem, he was in deep trouble. He glanced at the control panel's schematic, which flashed intermittently, taunting him with its complexity. He remembered an old component stored in the back, a makeshift part he had used in the past. It was a gamble, but he couldn't afford to hesitate. If he didn't act now, the consequences could be catastrophic. He took a moment to collect himself, pushing aside the rising tide of panic. "I've got to get that component," he whispered, determination flooding through him. As he turned to leave the panel, he could feel the weight of his co-workers' gazes on him, a mixture of fear and hope. They were counting on him, and he couldn't let them down. Max darted through the facility, his heart hammering in his chest as he navigated through the maze of machinery and equipment. The alarms continued to blare, a constant reminder of the urgency of the situation. He sprinted towards the storage area, pushing past the chaos that had erupted around him. The scent of oil and metal filled his nostrils, mingling with the sharp tang of adrenaline. "I can do this," he repeated like a mantra, reinforcing his resolve. Reaching the storage room, he was greeted by the familiar smell of dust and old machinery. The storage area was cluttered, filled with outdated equipment and forgotten tools, but his eyes were laser-focused. He scanned the shelves, searching for the component he had seen just days before. The adrenaline coursed through his veins, sharpening his focus as he retraced his steps. "Where is it?" he muttered to himself, rummaging through boxes and moving aside old machinery. The seconds felt like hours, and he could feel the pressure mounting. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he spotted it, a dusty circuit board nestled between two larger components. Relief washed over him as he reached for it, feeling the weight of hope in his hands. Max sprinted back toward the control panel, clutching the component tightly as he pushed through the chaos around him. Each step felt like 1,000 as the alarms blared, urging him forward. The stakes had never been higher. He had to succeed, not just for himself, but for everyone in the facility. He was not just a maintenance worker, he was a guardian of their safety. As he approached the panel again, the sight was even more ominous than before. The alarms shrieked louder, and he could feel the heat radiating from the machinery. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the task ahead. It was time to put his training into action. With steady hands, he opened the control panel once more, the chaotic mess of wires now feeling almost familiar. He could visualize the connections, each one a vital part of the system that needed to be united again. With determination, he began to replace the frayed wire, his mind racing as he thought about the consequences of failure. As he worked, a sudden surge of energy coursed through the panel, causing it to spark. Max's heart dropped as he leapt back, adrenaline flooding his system. "What the hell?" he gasped, panic creeping in. The stakes had just risen dramatically, he had to make a decision quickly. Should he continue or abort the repair? The question echoed in his mind, weighing heavily on his conscience. "Calm down, Max," he whispered, forcing himself to breathe deeply. "You can do this." He had faced challenges before, had navigated through crises that seemed insurmountable. He recalled his mentor's voice, reassuring him that instinct and intuition were just as important as technical knowledge. With a renewed sense of purpose, he leaned in closer to the panel, determined to see this through. With a steady hand, he adjusted the wires, correcting the connections. The alarms still screamed, but he had a plan. He would fix this, and he was going to do it right. The pressure was immense, but he felt a surge of confidence wash over him. "I can't let them down," he thought, the faces of his co-workers flashing in his mind. They were counting on him, and he couldn't fail. Max tightened the last connection and stepped back, taking a deep breath as he flipped the switch. The panel hummed to life, and the alarms began to quiet. Relief flooded through him as he realized he had done it, he had stabilized the panel. But the battle wasn't over, he knew that. The facility was still in jeopardy, and he had to be ready for whatever came next. Max felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him as he faced the control panel, a complex web of wires and circuits sprawled out like a chaotic tapestry. The air was thick with tension, and the relentless blaring of alarms echoed in his ears, amplifying his sense of urgency. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "I can do this," he murmured, barely hearing his own voice over the din. The panel's lights flickered ominously, casting erratic shadows on his face. As a maintenance worker at the Galactic Distribution Center, Max had dealt with his fair share of malfunctions, but this felt different. The stakes were higher. A meltdown wasn't just a threat, it was a reality waiting to unfold if he failed. He leaned closer to the panel, his heart racing as he examined the intricate designs etched into the control board. Each component was crucial, and a single misstep could lead to disastrous consequences. The heat radiated from the panel, a stark reminder that time was running out. He had seen too many accidents happen in this facility, and he wasn't about to let this one slip by him. As he began to inspect the tangled wires, memories flooded back. He recalled a time early in his career when a similar situation had spiraled out of control. An inexperienced technician had misread the diagnostics, and Max had been forced to step in at the last moment, averting disaster with a makeshift fix. That experience had taught him the importance of staying calm under pressure and trusting his instincts. If he could do it then, he could do it now. Suddenly, a crackle of electricity jolted him back to the present. He quickly pulled back, his pulse quickening. "Focus, Max," he scolded himself. He needed to concentrate. He couldn't afford to let panic cloud his judgment. With determination coursing through him, he dove back into the task at hand, searching for the malfunctioning component that had thrown everything into chaos. He carefully traced the wires, feeling the cool metal beneath his fingertips. Each connection was a lifeline for the system, and he had to find the weak point that was causing the alarms to blare. As he worked, the sounds of the facility around him faded into the background, replaced by the rhythmic beeping of the diagnostics. Come on," he muttered under his breath, urging himself to find the solution. There! A freight wire caught his eye, its copper strands exposed and sparking faintly. Max's heart sank for a moment. This was it, the culprit behind the alarm. He quickly assessed the situation. Replacing the wire was straightforward, but he had to ensure that the rest of the panel was functioning correctly. One miscalculation could lead to a full system failure. As he reached for his toolkit, he heard a voice over the intercom, a familiar tone that both reassured and added pressure. "Max, we need you to hurry. The system is unstable, and we're losing containment," his supervisor urged. "Understood," he replied, his voice steady despite the rising tension in his gut. "I'm on it." He could feel the eyes of his co-workers on him, a mix of anxiety and hope shimmering in the air. He was their last line of defense against potential disaster, and he couldn't let them down. With swift fingers, Max retrieved the necessary tools from his belt, his mind racing as he prepared to make the repair. The freight wire was a simple fix, yet in this high-stakes environment, simplicity often belied complexity. He carefully snipped the damaged portion and set to work, meticulously stripping the wire and preparing it for a new connection. In the midst of his repairs, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He glanced to the side and spotted a few of his colleagues, their faces etched with concern. They were counting on him to get it right. As he made the final adjustment, he felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. He was not just fixing a machine, he was safeguarding lives. He took a deep breath, steadied his hands, and connected the new wire. The moment of truth was upon him. "Here goes nothing," he uttered softly as he flipped the switch. The panel hummed with energy, and for a brief moment, everything seemed to hold its breath. Then the alarms blared louder than ever, and the lights flickered ominously. Max's heart sank as fear gripped him. He had hoped to silence the chaos, but it only intensified. The realization hit him hard: this wasn't over yet. There was something deeper at play. With renewed resolve, he dove back into the panel, scanning the components with a meticulous eye. The sound of alarms and the pressure of time weighed heavily on him, but he pushed through. He had faced challenges before, and he knew he wouldn't back down now. He had to find the source of the problem. As he continued his search, a thought crossed his mind: what if the issue was more than just a faulty wire? What if it was a deeper malfunction that required more than just a simple fix? He had to consider all possibilities. The facility's stability depended on it. The lights flickered over him again, casting long shadows on the panels. He could feel the heat rising, both from the machinery and the pressure mounting within him. Max was determined to find the solution, but he had to think clearly. He had learned that the best solutions often came from a calm mind, even amid turmoil. "Max, we're running out of time," his supervisor's voice crackled over the intercom again, a reminder that the fate of the facility rested on his shoulders. We need you to stabilize the system now. I'm working on it, he shouted back, his voice filled with urgency. Just give me a moment. He closed his eyes for a brief second, focusing on the sounds of the alarms and the whirring of machinery. He needed to tune out the panic and hone in on the task at hand. He recalled a technique his mentor had once shared: sometimes, you had to think outside the box. Maybe he could improvise a solution that could buy them some time while they dealt with the bigger issue. Max opened his eyes and began to brainstorm. He had to act quickly but wisely. Just then, a memory sparked in his mind, a method he used during his early days at the facility. It involved using a backup circuit from an older panel that had been decommissioned. It was a long shot, but it could work. He had to trust his instincts. Okay, I can do this, he whispered, adrenaline surging through him once more. If I can just get to the storage area, he glanced around, noting the path through the chaos. I'll be back in no time, he assured himself, determination fueling his steps. As Max bolted toward the storage room, he could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on him. The facility was alive with noise, and the pressure to perform was palpable. But he was ready to face whatever was thrown at him. If he could find that backup circuit, maybe he could stabilize the system long enough for a proper repair. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe, he thought, a fleeting moment of connection with those who might be listening. He was in the thick of it, and he could only hope that his efforts would resonate with anyone hearing his story. With his determination set, Max sprinted down the corridor, the alarms still blaring behind him, but he pushed through, focused on the task ahead. Time was of the essence, and he was determined to stop the meltdown. As Max sprinted down the corridor towards the storage area, the cacophony of alarms faded slightly in the background, replaced by the rhythmic thumping of his heart. Each step felt heavy, laden with the weight of responsibility. The sterile, metallic scent of the Galactic Distribution Center was overwhelming, mixed with a hint of ozone from the malfunctioning equipment. He pushed through the door of the storage room, the hinges creaking under the pressure of urgency. The storage room was dimly lit, filled with shelves stacked high with old panels, wires, and tools. It was a veritable treasure trove for someone like Max, who knew how to sift through the chaos and find what he needed. He scanned the shelves frantically, his eyes darting from one item to another. Come on, he muttered, searching for that backup circuit he remembered from years ago, a piece of equipment that could potentially save them all. As he rifled through the clutter, the memories of past repairs flooded his mind. He recalled late nights spent here, learning from seasoned workers who had taught him the ropes. The camaraderie they shared, the collective sigh of relief when a job was well done, it was what kept him going in this demanding environment. He could almost hear the voice of his mentor, reminding him, think outside the box, Max. Sometimes the simplest solution is right under your nose. Finally, he spotted it, the old Model XR7 circuit, dusty but intact, sitting in a corner as if waiting for him to return. Relief washed over him. He grabbed it, feeling its weight in his hand, a solid reassurance amid the chaos. Max turned to leave, but paused for a moment, glancing back at the shelves, pondering the countless hours spent amidst these relics of the past. I hope you're ready to help save the day, he whispered to the circuit, a small smile forming on his lips. Rushing back towards the control panel, he could hear the alarms blaring even louder now. The urgency in the air was palpable, and with each step, he felt the pressure build. It was not just a matter of fixing a machine, lives were at stake. He could sense the anxious eyes of his colleagues on him, their faith hanging in the balance. He had to succeed. Max, where are you? His supervisor's voice crackled over the intercom, tinged with a mix of impatience and worry. We can't hold on much longer. I'm on my way, he shouted back, pushing himself to move faster. His mind raced with possibilities as he approached the control panel once again. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through him, sharpening his focus. The panel loomed before him, a labyrinth of wires and circuits that had never looked more daunting. As he reached the panel, he took a moment to collect himself. The familiar smell of metal and machinery enveloped him, grounding him in the moment. He slid open the panel cover and was greeted by the sight of tangled wires, some sparking ominously. His heart raced, but he forced himself to breathe. Okay, let's do this, he muttered, channeling the calm he so desperately needed. He began to inspect the inner workings, recalling the steps he needed to take. With deft hands, he disconnected the damaged wire that had caused the initial issue. Just the first step, he reminded himself. He carefully set it aside and prepared to attach the backup circuit he had retrieved. The stakes were high, he had to get this right. As he worked, the sound of footsteps made him glance up. A few of his colleagues had gathered near the panel, their faces reflecting a mixture of hope and trepidation. He could see their concern, but he also recognized their trust in him. "Max, do you think you can fix it?" one of them, a young technician named Leo, asked, his voice barely audible over the blaring alarms. "I have to," Max replied, the weight of his words settling heavily in the air. "If I can get this circuit in place, we might be able to stabilize the system long enough for a proper fix." He gestured toward the panel, trying to project confidence even as doubt crept in. "You all just need to trust me. Just remember, we're all counting on you," Leo said, his eyes wide with concern. Max nodded, feeling the enormity of the situation pressing down on him. He was not just a maintenance worker, he was the linchpin in this moment, the only one who could avert disaster. Stay secure online with NordVPN's benefits, especially when dealing with sensitive information, he thought, a reminder of how important it was to maintain safety not just in the facility, but in every aspect of life. It was a funny thought in such a precarious moment, but it grounded him. He needed to focus. With determination fueling his actions, Max began to connect the new circuit, his hands steady despite the chaos surrounding him. Each connection brought a wave of hope, and he could feel the energy of his colleagues around him, a silent encouragement pushing him forward. "You can do this, Max," he whispered to himself, urging himself to stay focused. Just as he was about to make the final connection, a loud crackle erupted from the panel, sending a jolt of electricity through his hands. He staggered back, heart racing. "What was that?" one of his colleagues shouted, and panic rippled through the small gathering. "Stay back," Max ordered, instinctively stepping away from the panel. The alarms blared furiously, and the lights flickered ominously. "I need to assess the situation." He took a deep breath, suppressing the rising fear within him. The panel was alive with energy, but that meant there was still hope. He had to think clearly. He had a backup plan. If the new circuit didn't work, he could always try to reroute some of the connections. It wasn't conventional, but in a pinch, it might just buy them the time they needed. "Stay with me," he said, looking at his colleagues. "I'm going to try something different." He felt their eyes on him, a mix of hope and fear reflected back at him. It was a reminder of how much was at stake, and he couldn't afford to fail. Max dove back into the panel, his heart racing as he explored the intricate maze of wires. He had to trust his instincts, to find a way to stabilize the system before it was too late. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe, he thought as he worked, a fleeting moment of connection with anyone who might be listening. With each movement, he could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had to stay focused, to think clearly. The alarms were a constant reminder of their impending doom, but he was determined not to let fear dictate his actions. He could do this. He just had to keep pushing forward. With renewed vigor, Max began to make the necessary adjustments, hoping against hope that he could avert disaster. The fate of the facility, and everyone in it, rested on his shoulders, and he was ready to rise to the challenge. The alarms blared with an intensity that rattled Max's bones, a high-pitched shriek piercing through the chaos of the Galactic Distribution Center. Each shriek seemed to echo his own rising panic. He had just managed to disconnect the damaged wire, but the task was far from over. As he prepared to attach the backup circuit he had painstakingly retrieved, he could feel the pressure mounting. Time was not on his side, and the stakes were higher than ever. With every heartbeat, he could sense the weight of the facility's safety resting on his shoulders. Opening the panel had felt like a breach into a realm of chaos, and now he was fully immersed in it. The smell of burnt wires mixed with the metallic scent of the control panel, filling the air with a tang that made him gag slightly. He shook his head, forcing himself to focus. "You've got this, Max," he whispered under his breath, trying to steady his nerves. As he glanced up, he saw his colleagues gathered nearby, their faces a mixture of concern and hope. Leo, the young technician who had bravely asked if he could fix it, stood at the forefront, his eyes wide. "Max, do you think you can make it work?" "I have to," Max replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "If I can get this circuit in place, we might stabilize the system long enough to implement a proper fix." He gestured toward the tangled mess of wires and circuits, hoping the confidence he projected would calm their fears. "Just remember, we're all counting on you," Leo said, his expression a blend of trepidation and trust. A wave of gratitude washed over Max. He needed this support. He wasn't just a maintenance worker, he was their last line of defense against a possible meltdown. Max's hands trembled slightly as he picked up the backup circuit. The alarms pulsed like a strobe light in his peripheral vision, their urgency amplifying the moment. Stay secure online with NordVPN's benefits, especially when dealing with sensitive information, he thought, recalling the importance of maintaining security in all aspects of life, not just the facility. But right now, all he could think about was the task at hand. He took a deep breath, steadying himself, and began the process of connecting the new circuit. Each click of the wires felt like a step closer to averting disaster. The adrenaline coursing through his veins sharpened his focus, and he could feel the energy of his colleagues enveloping him, a silent rallying cry for him to succeed. "You can do this, Max," he whispered, urging himself forward. Just as he was about to make the final connection, an unexpected crackle erupted from the panel, and he recoiled instinctively, heart racing. "What's happening?" a colleague shouted, panic creeping into his voice. "Stay back," Max ordered, taking a step away from the panel. The alarms grew louder, a cacophony of impending doom, and the lights flickered ominously. Gripping the edge of the console, he felt a surge of determination. "I need to assess the situation." Sparks flew, and for a moment, he felt lost in the chaos. The panel was alive with energy, a dangerous pulse that could either lead to salvation or catastrophe. "Okay, think," he muttered to himself, scanning the panel for any signs of what went wrong. He had a backup plan. If the new circuit didn't work, he could reroute some of the connections. It wasn't conventional, but in a pinch, it might just buy them the time they needed. "Everyone, stay with me," he shouted, looking at the gathering of his colleagues. Their eyes were all on him, hopeful, anxious, and desperate for him to succeed. He felt a sense of responsibility wash over him, a need to rise to the occasion. "I'm going to try something different." Max dove back into the panel, his hands moving with purpose as he explored the intricate maze of wires. Each connection represented a lifeline, a possible way to stabilize the system before it was too late. The alarms served as a constant reminder of their impending doom, but he was determined not to let fear dictate his actions. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe, he thought as he worked, imagining a viewer willing him on through this crisis. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Every second counted. The alarms were a reminder of how precarious their situation was, but with resolve igniting within him, he began to make the necessary adjustments, hoping against hope that this would avert disaster. With a few more connections made, he could see a flicker of potential success. The panel buzzed, and the alarms shifted in tone, almost as if they were responding to his efforts. Heart pounding, he believed for a moment that they might be turning a corner. Come on, he urged the panel, his hands moving faster as adrenaline fueled his determination. Suddenly, he noticed a component that seemed out of place, a critical piece that had been shifted during his earlier repairs. No, he muttered under his breath, realizing that this misplacement could be the key to their salvation or destruction. He reached for it, carefully repositioning it with steady hands, his heart racing as he hoped he wasn't too late. As he restored the component, the alarms blared even louder, and for a fleeting moment, Max felt the weight of the world crash down on him. "What now?" someone cried out, their voice cracking under pressure. "Don't panic," Max shouted, forcing himself to remain calm. "I'm almost there." He had to believe in himself, in his training, and in the team that stood behind him. They were all counting on him. With one final twist of a screw, he secured the component and stepped back, bracing himself for the reaction. The alarms filled the air with a deafening roar, and the lights flickered one last time before silence. Max held his breath, waiting for the inevitable. Then, one by one, the light stabilized, shifting from a frantic red to a calm blue. The alarms faded into nothingness, replaced by a deep, reassuring hum of the machinery returning to normal. Relief flooded through him, and he turned to face his colleagues. A collective cheer erupted around him, and he felt their joy wash over him like a wave. "You did it, Max!" Leo shouted, a grin stretching across his face. "I couldn't have done it without you guys," Max replied, his heart swelling with gratitude. The moment felt monumental, a testament to their teamwork and resilience. They had faced the storm together, and they had emerged victorious. As the machinery hummed steadily in the background, Max realized that he had not only averted disaster but had also reinforced the bonds of trust within his team. This experience would forever change how they approached challenges together. Stay secure online with NordVPN's benefits, especially when dealing with sensitive information, he thought again, reinforcing the notion that security and stability were paramount in every aspect. But for now, all he wanted to do was savor this victory, this moment of triumph that they had fought so hard to achieve. In that instant, Max knew that he would face any challenge that came their way, as long as they stood united. They were more than just colleagues, they were a family bonded by the fires of adversity, ready to tackle whatever the universe threw at them next. Max's gamble paid off as he steadied himself, clutching the edge of the control panel. The alarms had ceased, but the tension in the air was palpable. He could still feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, a mix of relief and residual fear. "I did it," he muttered to himself, yet the moment of triumph was short-lived. The machinery around him began to hum erratically, signaling that something was still amiss. As he stepped back, surveying the panel with a critical eye, the lights flickered ominously. Suddenly, a surge of energy coursed through the circuits, causing the panel to spark dangerously. Max's heart raced as he realized that while he had temporarily stabilized one issue, others were still lurking beneath the surface. "What now?" someone called out from behind him, their voice tinged with panic. "Everyone, stay calm," he shouted, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. "I need a moment to think." He could hear the murmurs of concern from the gathered team, and it spurred him to push through the rising tide of anxiety. They were all counting on him, and he couldn't let them down. He leaned closer to the machinery, his hands trembling slightly as he examined the intricate mess of wires and components. The complexity of the system was daunting, each part depended on the others to function correctly, and a single misstep could lead to disaster. With the alarms silenced, there was a brief moment of hope. In the back of his mind, however, he kept recalling the risk of a full meltdown, the very scenario he had been trying to prevent. "Everyone, I need your help," Max called out, gathering the attention of his colleagues once again. "We have to work together if we're going to fix this." He felt a sense of urgency swell within him. "If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe," he thought as he pushed himself to refocus. As his team gathered around him, he noticed the range of emotions etched on their faces: fear, determination, and a flicker of hope. Leo, a fellow technician, stepped forward, his brows furrowed. "What's the situation, Max?" "I think I've stabilized a part of the panel, but something deeper is causing these fluctuations. We need to find out what it is before it gets worse." Max's voice was steady, but he could feel the pressure mounting. Every second felt like a countdown toward a disaster that loomed ever closer. "We need to check the secondary systems," Leo suggested, pointing to a series of gauges that were still out of balance. "If one of them is malfunctioning, it could lead to a chain reaction." "Right, let's split up," Max replied, trying to keep everyone focused. "Leo, you take the secondary systems. I'll look into the main circuitry again. If we can identify the source of the instability, we might be able to fix it before it's too late." As the team dispersed, Max returned to the control panel, his fingers tracing the wires like a musician finding the right notes on a guitar. He could almost hear the hum of the machine resonating with a melody of tension and urgency. The faint smell of burnt plastic mixed with the metallic tang of the machinery filled his nostrils, a reminder that their time was running out. He recalled a lesson from his mentor, who had once said, "Sometimes the solution lies not in fixing what is broken, but in understanding what caused it to break." With that thought in mind, Max began examining the wiring more closely, his eyes darting from one connection to another. As he worked, he felt a wave of vulnerability wash over him. Memories of past mistakes flickered through his mind, the time he had misread a signal and caused a minor explosion in the maintenance bay. He shuddered at the thought but forced it aside. This was different, he was different. Just then, the lights flickered again, and the alarms blared back to life. The sound was deafening, drowning out his thoughts. No, 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 he exclaimed, frustration bubbling to the surface. The panel was fighting against him, and he had to regain control. He took a deep breath, centering himself. Focus, Max. You've got this. He began testing the components systematically, checking for loose connections or burnt wires, trying to isolate the problem amidst the chaos. Max, I think I found something. Leo shouted from across the room. Max turned, heart racing, as Leo waved his arms excitedly, beckoning him over. It looks like there's a short circuit in the auxiliary power supply. It's sending erratic signals to the main panel. Great catch. Max replied, relief flooding through him. Can you reset it? I'll keep an eye on the main panel. On it. Leo responded, already moving to the auxiliary panel. With renewed purpose, Max turned his attention back to the main panel. He noticed a peculiar flickering in one of the displays, a sign that something was still out of sync. The stakes felt higher than ever, but he remained calm, determined to see this through. As Leo worked feverishly on the auxiliary circuit, Max began to formulate a plan. If they could stabilize the auxiliary power supply, it might just buy them the time needed to pinpoint any remaining issues. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him, a chance to avert disaster lay in his hands. Everyone, just a little longer. Max shouted, a mix of encouragement and urgency in his voice. We're so close. He turned back to the main panel, fingers flying over the controls as he adjusted settings, trying to anticipate the system's next move. Each click of a button felt like a bet against time, and he was determined to win. The alarm seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, an unwelcome reminder that failure wasn't an option. Suddenly, the alarms blared even louder, and the lights dimmed. What the hell? Max exclaimed, panic creeping in. Leo, what's happening? I'm resetting it. Just a few more seconds. Leo's voice was strained, and Max could feel the tension in the room sharpening. Come on, come on. Max urged, as if his words could somehow coax the machines into compliance. He felt a knot in his stomach, knowing that every second counted. Stay secure online with NordVPN's benefits, especially when dealing with sensitive information, he reminded himself, trying to channel that reassurance into his work. The sounds of machinery whirring and alarms blaring filled the air, creating a chaotic symphony that matched the urgency of the moment. Max closed his eyes for a brief second, imagining a world where everything was functional and stable. That vision fueled his resolve. With a final adjustment, he hit the reset button on the main panel. The alarms fell silent, and the light stabilized, glowing with a steady blue. Max opened his eyes and let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Did it work? He asked, heart racing with hope. Leo stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow. Looks like it. The readings are stabilizing. An exhilaration swept through the room as the rest of the team erupted into cheers. Max felt a wave of adrenaline rush through him. He had faced the storm, and they had emerged victorious. The repairs had not only saved the facility but strengthened their camaraderie. In that moment, he knew they could face whatever challenges lay ahead, united in purpose and trust. Max felt a rush of exhilaration as the alarms finally quieted. The lights in the control room stabilized, casting a steady glow across the various panels and equipment surrounding him. He had managed to stabilize the panel, but deep down, he knew that this victory was only temporary. As he looked around, he could see the relief wash over his colleagues, but he also sensed an undercurrent of tension. The facility's systems had been pushed to their limits, and they were far from out of danger. All right, everyone, stay alert, he said, his voice steady but firm. We need to keep monitoring the readings. If there's a deeper issue, we can't let our guard down yet. Max turned back to the main panel, his fingers gliding over the controls. The data flowing in front of him was a riot of numbers and indicators, some stabilizing while others continued to fluctuate erratically. He felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle heavily upon his shoulders. His heart raced as he remembered the warnings blaring just moments before, and he knew they couldn't afford another slip-up. A sudden thought struck him, and he glanced over at Leo, who was still at the auxiliary panel. "Leo, can you pull up the diagnostics on the entire system? I have a feeling we might be dealing with something bigger than a simple malfunction." "On it," Leo replied, quickly typing commands into the auxiliary panel. As the screen filled with data, Max could see the concern etched on Leo's face. The readings indicated that while the auxiliary circuit was stabilizing, other parts of the system were still experiencing fluctuations. "Look at this," Leo said, his voice rising with urgency. "The energy levels are still inconsistent. There's a deeper issue somewhere in the core systems." Max's stomach dropped. "Great. Just what we need." He took a deep breath, trying to quell the rising panic within him. The notion of a core system failure could mean a catastrophic meltdown if they didn't act quickly. "Let's break it down. We need to check the core systems immediately." As they began to sift through the data, Max felt a wave of determination wash over him. He thought back to the day he joined the maintenance crew, the excitement he felt walking through the sprawling Galactic Distribution Center for the first time. It had been his dream job, a chance to work with cutting-edge technology and make a real difference. Now, that dream was on the line, and he was determined not to let it slip away. "Max, I think I see something," Leo said, pointing to a series of readings on the display. "There's a spike in the reactor's coolant levels. It looks like it's not circulating properly." "Then that's our starting point," Max replied, his mind racing as he formulated a plan. If the coolant isn't circulating, it's only a matter of time before the reactor overheats. We need to head to the reactor room and check it out. "Do you think it's safe?" Leo asked, concern etched on his features. "Safety is a relative term right now," Max replied, forcing a smirk. "But we don't have a choice. Let's go." The two of them raced down the corridor, the sounds of their footsteps echoing against the metal floor. Max's heart pounded in rhythm with the alarms, a constant reminder of the urgency of their situation. As they approached the reactor room, the air grew thick with tension. The lights flickered above them, casting eerie shadows along the walls. "Stay sharp," Max instructed as they entered the reactor room, the heavy door sliding shut behind them. The vast space was filled with the hum of machinery, and the walls were lined with intricate panels displaying a myriad of readings. The reactor itself loomed at the center, pulsating with energy. Max walked up to the coolant system control panel, his fingers dancing across the buttons as he analyzed the data. The coolant levels were dangerously low, and the circulation was sluggish. "This could be it," he muttered to himself. "If we can't get the coolant flowing, we're looking at a meltdown." "Do you want me to check the coolant valves?" Leo suggested, already moving toward the nearest access panel. "Yeah, let's see if there's a blockage. I'll keep an eye on the central readings here." As Leo worked, Max focused on the reactor's gauges. An unsettling feeling gnawed at him. He could feel the pressure building, not just in the reactor but within himself. He had to make the right moves, or it could mean disaster for everyone in the facility. The minutes ticked by as Leo checked each valve, calling out numbers and readings. "I think I found something," Leo exclaimed, his voice tinged with excitement. "There's a blockage in the coolant line. I can clear it, but I'll need you to monitor the reactor closely. If it starts to heat up, we need to shut it down immediately." "Got it," Max replied, adrenaline surging through his veins. "Just be careful. We can't afford any mistakes." Leo nodded, and Max watched as he began working on the valve. The tension in the room was palpable, and Max could feel the weight of their situation pressing down on him. The alarms had quieted, but they were far from out of the woods. "Let's see if this does the trick," Leo muttered as he manipulated the valve, twisting it slowly. Max focused intently on the reactor's readings, watching for any signs of change. As the valve finally clicked into place, Max held his breath. Come on, slowly, the coolant levels began to rise, and Max felt a flicker of hope. It's working. We're getting flow. But just as hope began to swell, the alarm suddenly blared back to life, louder than before. Max's heart sank. What now? Looks like the reactor is spiking. Leo shouted, scrambling back to his side. The coolant is flowing, but it's not enough to stabilize the temperature. Max's mind raced. They needed to act fast. We might need to manually increase the coolant supply. Can we bypass the system? I can try. Leo yelled, fingers racing across the panel. But it'll take a few moments. Just hold on. Hold on? That's easy for you to say. Max shot back, feeling the pressure mount again. Stay secure online with NordVPN's benefits, especially when dealing with sensitive information, he reminded himself, trying to channel that reassurance into the chaos surrounding him. As Leo worked furiously on the control panel, Max felt the room grow warmer. Sweat dripped down his forehead, and he could hear the whir of machinery growing more agitated. The stakes had never felt higher. Almost there, Leo said through gritted teeth, his focus unwavering. Just a little more. Max urged, feeling his heart race as the alarms continued to scream. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife, and they were running out of time. Finally, Leo hit a button, and the coolant surged into the reactor. Max watched the readings with bated breath as the temperature began to stabilize. Yes. Come on. The alarms began to silence, and the room filled with a calm hum as the reactor finally leveled out. Max let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. We did it. Leo turned to him, a wide grin on his face. That was too close for comfort. Tell me about it, Max replied, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. Now, let's make sure everything else is secure before we celebrate. As they began their checks, Max couldn't shake the feeling that they had narrowly escaped disaster. But amidst the chaos, he felt a sense of camaraderie with Leo and the rest of the crew. They were in this together, and together, they had faced the storm and emerged victorious. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe. As the alarms blared, Max felt a surge of determination. He had stabilized the panel, but now, the entire facility seemed to ripple with tension, like an electric current running through the air. He knew that to tackle the deeper issue at hand, he couldn't do it alone. Gathering his thoughts, he decided it was time to enlist help from his colleagues. Leo, I need to bring in the others, he called out, glancing over his shoulder at his partner, who was still monitoring the control panel. Got it. I'll keep an eye on the readings here, Leo replied, his voice steady but laced with urgency. Just remember to keep it focused. We can't afford chaos right now. Max nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. He turned and sprinted down the corridor, his boots echoing against the metal floor, the rhythmic sound almost comforting amidst the chaos. He reached the central hub of the facility, a large open space filled with workers hustling to ensure everything was running smoothly. Hey, everyone! Max shouted, raising his hands to get their attention. We've got a situation. The coolant system is stabilized, but there's a deeper issue we need to address, or we could be facing a meltdown. A murmur spread through the crowd, and several faces turned serious. Among them was Zara, a sharp-minded technician known for her quick thinking. What do you need from us, Max? She asked, stepping forward. I need a team to assess the reactor systems and check for any further malfunctions. We might be looking at a cascade failure if we don't act fast, he explained, urgency lacing his voice. I'll help, shouted Quinn, a seasoned engineer with a knack for diagnostics. I've worked with reactor systems before. We can split into teams and cover more ground. Great. Zara, Quinn, you two take the reactor level. Check every component you can find. I want to know if there's anything else that's been tampered with, Max directed, feeling a sense of hope begin to blossom in his chest. As the teams began to split off, he felt a surge of adrenaline. The camaraderie among his colleagues was palpable. It was as if they were all wired into the same frequency, ready to face whatever challenge lay ahead. Max, I can handle the auxiliary systems. I'll keep track of the coolant levels while you're at it, Leo added, joining the group. Perfect. We need to know if the coolant is flowing as it should, Max replied, his mind racing with possibilities. The interconnected nature of their tasks sent a thrill through him. If they worked together, they could avert disaster. He watched as the team dispersed, each individual determined to do their part. As he turned back towards the reactor, he noticed a small group of technicians huddled near another control panel, their brows furrowed in concentration. He could see the flickering lights reflecting off their worried faces. "What's going on?" he asked, approaching them. "We're having issues with the power distribution," said Ivy, a junior technician. "It doesn't match the readings from the main control panel. We might have a fault in one of the circuits." Max's heart sank. They had to act quickly. "Okay, let's get to work on that. I'll check in with Zara and Quinn, then we'll regroup." "If we can't get the power stabilized, it won't matter what we do with the coolant," he urged, feeling the tension rising again. As he made his way to the reactor room, he could feel the atmosphere shift. The air was thick with unspoken fears and determination. He reached the door and pushed it open, the coolness of the room washing over him like a wave. Inside, he saw Zara and Quinn already on their knees, checking connections and components. "How's it looking?" Max asked, joining them. "Not great," Zara replied, glancing up with a grim expression. "There's corrosion on the coolant pipe. If we don't fix it, we're risking a leak. Can you patch it up?" Max inquired, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation. "I think so, but we'll need some extra parts from the storage room," Quinn interjected. "I can go grab what we need." "All right, but be quick." "Every second counts," Max urged. As Quinn hurried off, Max and Zara continued to assess the damage. It was a delicate process, and Max's hands trembled slightly as he worked. He felt the pressure of the moment crash down on him, but he pushed through, focusing on each task, one step at a time. "Max, look here," Zara said, pointing to a panel. "We also need to replace this control relay. It's fried, and no amount of patching will fix it." Max nodded, biting his lip. "Can we bypass it temporarily?" "Maybe, but it'll be risky." "We'd have to monitor it closely to avoid overload," she cautioned. "Let's do it." "We don't have any other options," he decided, his heart racing. He knew that taking risks was part of the job, especially now. They had to improvise and adapt quickly. Just then, Quinn returned, carrying a toolbox filled with various components. "I've got what we need." "Let's get this done," he declared, a determined glint in his eyes. "Good, let's make this quick," Max urged, grabbing the relay and handing it to Zara. They worked efficiently, exchanging glances, their unspoken communication a testament to their teamwork. As they installed the new relay, Max felt the weight of their situation pressing down on him. The alarms were still echoing through the facility, a constant reminder of the stakes involved. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe, he thought to himself, channeling that energy into his work. Finally, they finished, and Max stepped back, wiping the sweat off his brow. "All right, let's power it up and see if this works." Quinn nodded and pressed the button. The control panel hummed to life, lights flickering into existence. Max held his breath as the gauges began to stabilize. The tension in the room was palpable, and for a moment, it felt as if the entire facility held its breath. Come on, Max muttered under his breath, his heart racing. Then, as if responding to their efforts, the alarms began to quiet. The lights on the control panel glowed steadily, and the reactor's readings returned to normal. Relief washed over him, and he exchanged triumphant glances with Zara and Quinn. "We did it!" Max exclaimed, a smile breaking across his face. "Let's not celebrate just yet," Zara cautioned, still focused on the readings. "We need to make sure everything is secure before we breathe easy." "Right," Max agreed, feeling the adrenaline still coursing through him. "Let's regroup and make sure the power distribution is stable. We can't let our guard down. We've come too far to fail now." As they made their way back to the control hub, Max felt a newfound sense of purpose. They were a team, and together, they would face whatever came next. The facility hummed with energy, and he realized that the true strength of their work was in their unity. With each step, he felt more confident. They were in this together, and no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would rise to meet them. As Max prepared to lead them into the next phase of their efforts, he knew that as long as they worked together, they could overcome anything. "Let's do this," he said, determination etched on his face. As Max and his team gathered around the control panel, the tension in the air was almost palpable. They had managed to stabilize the initial crisis, but the deeper issues plaguing the facility remained unresolved. Max looked at his colleagues, their faces a mix of determination and anxiety. "We need to figure out what's causing the instability in the reactor," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Zara, who had been poring over the diagnostics, nodded in agreement. "The coolant levels are fluctuating more than they should. It's almost as if something is interfering with the system." She glanced up, her brow furrowed. "If we don't pinpoint the issue soon, we could face a meltdown. We need to act fast." Quinn, always the optimist, chimed in, "Let's break this down. If we can isolate each section of the system, we might find the root cause. We know the coolant is essential for keeping everything stable." He looked at Max, hope shining in his eyes. "What do you think?" Max felt a wave of gratitude for his team. Their camaraderie and shared determination gave him strength. "I think you're right. Let's start by checking each section of the coolant lines and the pressure readings. We need to work fast but carefully." As they began their inspection, the alarms blared in the background, a relentless reminder of the stakes they were facing. Max focused on the task at hand, pushing aside his rising anxiety. He could hear the steady hum of the machinery around them, punctuated by the occasional crackle of static from the control panels. It was a sound that had become all too familiar, one he associated with failure. "Quinn, check the pressure gauge on the secondary coolant line," Max instructed, moving to the primary line. "Zara, can you monitor the temperature levels? We need to know if there are any spikes." The team moved in sync, each member falling into their roles with an ease born of repeated practice. Max's heart raced as he inspected the primary coolant line, running his hands along the metal surface. It felt cool to the touch, but the pressure gauge indicated a slight drop. "Something isn't right," he muttered, his mind racing with possibilities. "Looks like the secondary line is under pressure," Quinn shouted, his voice barely audible over the alarms. "It's spiking more than it should. I think there's a blockage somewhere down the line." "Then let's isolate it," Zara replied, her voice filled with urgency. "We need to divert the flow and relieve the pressure before it blows." Max nodded, adrenaline pumping through his veins. "Quinn, can you set the bypass?" "Zara, I'll need your help to get the flow redirected. We need to act fast." As they worked, Max's mind drifted back to the training sessions he had attended. He had learned about pressure systems and coolant flows, but this was different. This wasn't just theory, it was real, and lives depended on their success. "Come on, Max, think," he urged himself, his hands moving deftly over the controls. "You can do this." With every adjustment he made, he felt the weight of responsibility settle heavier on his shoulders. The alarms continued to blare, a constant reminder of their impending doom. "Max, the pressure is still too high," Quinn shouted, frustration creeping into his voice. "If we don't do something soon, we might lose everything." "Just a little more," Max replied, his voice measured despite the chaos around him. "We can do this. Trust the process." He focused on the panel, feeling a sense of connection to the machine. It was as if he could sense its pulse, its heartbeat, through the vibrations of the metal. "Okay, I'm initiating the bypass now," Quinn said, his fingers flying over the controls. The hum of the machinery began to shift, and for a moment, the alarms quieted. "Did it work?" Zara asked, her eyes wide with anticipation. Max held his breath, watching the pressure gauge. Slowly, the needle began to stabilize. "Yes. The pressure is dropping," he exclaimed, relief flooding through him. "We're getting somewhere." But just as they began to celebrate their small victory, a loud crack echoed through the facility, and the lights flickered ominously. What was that? Zara asked, her voice filled with fear. Max's heart raced again. We need to check the reactor chamber, he shouted, leading the way as they rushed down the corridor. The sound echoed in his ears, a grim reminder that their success was still precarious. Once inside the reactor chamber, they were met with a chaotic scene. Alarms blared louder than ever, and the lights flickered erratically. Max's stomach dropped as he saw the readings on the control panel. The coolant levels were dangerously low, and the temperature was rising rapidly. Max! Quinn yelled. We need to stabilize the reactor now. We can't let this escalate. I know. Max snapped, his mind racing. We have to get the backup coolant system online. If we can't restore balance, we're looking at a meltdown. Let's do it! Zara shouted, her determination shining through. What do we need to do? Quinn, I need you to start the backup system. Zara, check the coolant reserves. Make sure we have enough to keep the reactor cool, Max instructed, feeling the pressure mount with every passing second. As he worked the controls, he felt the sweat trickle down his back. Every decision mattered. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe. We're in this together, he thought, channeling that energy into his focus. The backup system flickered to life, and Max held his breath as he watched the coolant levels slowly begin to rise. Come on, he urged under his breath, praying for success. Suddenly, the lights dimmed, and the alarms stopped. What just happened? Quinn asked, confusion evident in his voice. Max glanced at the control panel, and his heart sank. I think we've lost power to the main system. If we don't restore it quickly, we're going to be in serious trouble. Let's get moving. Zara urged, her voice steady and strong. We can't give up now. Together, they worked to restore power, a sense of urgency fueling their actions. Max felt a sense of camaraderie with his team that he had never experienced before. They were united in their fight against the impending disaster, and he knew that together, they could succeed. As they pushed through the chaos, he felt hopeful. They had come so far, and he believed in their ability to overcome this latest challenge. The stakes were high, but their resolve was stronger. Let's finish this, Max said, determination coursing through his veins as they raced toward the control panel, ready to take on whatever came next. As Max and his team huddled around the control panel, urgency filled the air. The atmosphere crackled with tension, and the faint hum of the machinery seemed to amplify the gravity of their situation. Max felt the weight of his team's expectations on his shoulders. They had come so far, but the stakes had never been higher. The alarms had quieted momentarily, but that only offered a brief respite from the impending disaster. Max, the readings aren't stabilizing, Quinn said, his brow furrowed as he analyzed the data. We need to find out what caused this failure before it escalates. We can't afford to miss anything. Max nodded, his mind racing. Let's split up. We need to cover more ground. Quinn, check the coolant systems. Zara, you and I will inspect the reactor chamber for anything out of the ordinary. He glanced at both of them, trying to instill confidence. We can do this, we just need to focus and work together. As they moved away from the control panel, the sound of the alarms faded into the background, replaced by a dull thrum that resonated through the facility. Max pushed open the door to the reactor chamber, and the heat hit him like a wave. He could feel the sweat on his brow as he scanned the gauges. The readings were still fluctuating, and his stomach churned at the thought of what might happen if they didn't rectify the situation. Look at this, Zara pointed to a small leak near the coolant pipes. That could explain the pressure issues. If we don't seal it, we're going to have a much bigger problem on our hands. Max crouched down to examine the leak more closely, his hands brushing against the cool metal of the pipes. You're right, he said, pulling out a repair kit. We'll need to patch this up as quickly as possible. Can you grab a wrench from the toolbox? While Zara hurried off to fetch the tool, Max pulled out a few adhesive patches, hoping they would hold under the pressure. He felt a mix of frustration and determination. They were so close to stabilizing the reactor, yet it felt like 1,000 obstacles were in their way. Just then, Quinn burst into the chamber, his face pale. "Max," he shouted, urgency lacing his voice. "The coolant levels are dropping faster than we anticipated. If we don't get this under control right now, we're looking at a meltdown." Max's heart raced at the thought. "What about the backup coolant system? Can we get it online?" "I'm trying, but there's a power fluctuation that's preventing me from accessing it," Quinn replied, his voice strained. "We might have to reset the entire system to get it running." "No time for that," Max said, biting his lip as he worked on sealing the leak. "We don't know how long we have. We need to find a way to stabilize the reactor without shutting down the mainframe." As Zara returned with the wrench, Max felt a flicker of hope. "Let's put our heads together," he said, glancing between his teammates. "What if we reroute the power from the auxiliary systems? It might give us enough boost to stabilize the coolant flow temporarily." "I like it," Quinn said, his expression brightening. "It's risky, but it could work. We'll have to do it quickly, though. Can you finish patching that leak while I reroute the power?" Max nodded, working quickly as Zara held the patch in place. "Hold it steady," he instructed, feeling the pressure of time weighing heavily on them. The alarms had started to blare again, and every second felt like an eternity. "Done!" Zara exclaimed as Max secured the patch. "Now, let's get to that power reroute." Max raced back to the control panel, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Quinn, you ready?" he asked, his heart pounding in his chest. "On my mark," Quinn said, fingers poised over the controls. 3, 2, 1, go. Max watched as Quinn initiated the reroute. The lights flickered ominously, and the machinery groaned as the power shifted. Come on, Max urged, his voice a whisper of hope. Suddenly, the alarms quieted, and the pressure gauge stabilized for the first time in what felt like hours. "Yes! It's working!" Max shouted, relief washing over him. "Not yet," Quinn cautioned. "We still need to monitor those coolant levels. If they drop again, we'll be right back where we started." Max felt a wave of gratitude for his team. They were working as one, each member playing a crucial role in averting disaster. It was a reminder of how important collaboration could be in high-stress situations. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe. We're all in this together, he thought, channeling their collective energy into a singular focus. As they monitored the systems, Max's mind raced with thoughts of what could have gone wrong. Had someone tampered with the equipment? Were there deeper issues they hadn't uncovered yet? "We need to investigate further," he said, breaking the silence. "I have a feeling this isn't over." Zara looked up, concern etched on her face. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. It just feels like we've only addressed the symptoms, not the root cause," he explained. "We need to check the main reactor controls. There might be something we missed." Quinn nodded in agreement. "Let's move before the pressure fluctuates again." Together, they bolted toward the reactor's main control room, each step echoing the urgency of their mission. As they entered, Max's heart sank. The main control panel was flashing red, and the readings indicated a critical fault. "This can't be happening," he murmured, dread settling in his stomach. "What do we do? We can't handle this alone." Zara's voice was laced with panic. "Everyone, listen." Max raised his voice, trying to instill calm. "We've dealt with worse. Let's think this through. Quinn, check the power distribution. Zara, see if you can find any data on system malfunctions. I'll handle the reactor's status report." As they worked, Max felt the pressure of the moment. This was a team effort, and he didn't want to let anyone down. The clock was ticking, and they had to act fast. Each second felt like an eternity, but he also knew that every decision, every movement counted. He focused on the data flowing in front of him, trying to piece together the puzzle. Just then, a chilling thought crossed his mind. "Wait a second," he said, looking up. "What if this malfunction was a deliberate act? What if someone wanted to sabotage the reactor?" Zara's eyes widened. Do you really think someone would do that? We can't rule it out, Max replied, the gravity of his words hanging in the air. If we're going to fix this, we need to consider all the possibilities. We can't just treat the symptoms, we need to get to the bottom of this. Quinn's fingers flew over the controls as he continued to scan for anomalies in the data. If we can isolate the fault, maybe we can prevent another incident in the future, he suggested, determination in his voice. Exactly, Max said, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Let's stay focused, and we'll get through this together. As the alarms rang out once more, echoing through the tight confines of the control room, Max felt a surge of hope. They were on the brink of something monumental, a revelation that could change everything. With his team by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next, determined to save the facility and everyone in it. The alarms had started to blare again, and every second felt like an eternity. The entire facility was on edge, a tension that was palpable in the air. Max Carter, surrounded by flashing lights and the sound of machinery working overtime, felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He had just managed to stabilize the system to a certain extent, but now they were faced with an even greater challenge. Done! Zara exclaimed as Max secured the patch. Now, let's get to that power reroute. Max raced back to the control panel, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Quinn, you ready? He asked, his heart pounding in his chest. On my mark, Quinn said, fingers poised over the controls. 3, 2, 1, go. Max watched as Quinn initiated the reroute. The lights flickered ominously, and the machinery groaned as the power shifted. Come on, Max urged, his voice a whisper of hope. Suddenly, the alarms quieted, and the pressure gauge stabilized for the first time in what felt like hours. Yes! It's working! Max shouted, relief washing over him. Not yet, Quinn cautioned. We still need to monitor those coolant levels. If they drop again, we'll be right back where we started. Max felt a wave of gratitude for his team. They were working as one, each member playing a crucial role in averting disaster. It was a reminder of how important collaboration could be in high-stress situations. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe. We're all in this together, he thought, channeling their collective energy into a singular focus. As they monitored the systems, Max's mind raced with thoughts of what could have gone wrong. Had someone tampered with the equipment? Were there deeper issues they hadn't uncovered yet? We need to investigate further, he said, breaking the silence. I have a feeling this isn't over. Zara looked up, concern etched on her face. What do you mean? I don't know, it just feels like we've only addressed the symptoms, not the root cause, he explained. We need to check the main reactor controls. There might be something we missed. Quinn nodded in agreement. Let's move before the pressure fluctuates again. Together, they bolted toward the reactor's main control room, each step echoing the urgency of their mission. As they entered, Max's heart sank. The main control panel was flashing red, and the readings indicated a critical fault. This can't be happening, he murmured, dread settling in his stomach. What do we do? We can't handle this alone. Zara's voice was laced with panic. Everyone, listen. Max raised his voice, trying to instill calm. We've dealt with worse. Let's think this through. Quinn, check the power distribution. Zara, see if you can find any data on system malfunctions. I'll handle the reactor's status report. As they worked, Max felt the pressure of the moment. This was a team effort, and he didn't want to let anyone down. The clock was ticking, and they had to act fast. Each second felt like an eternity, but he also knew that every decision, every movement counted. He focused on the data flowing in front of him, trying to piece together the puzzle. Just then, a chilling thought crossed his mind. Wait a second, he said, looking up. What if this malfunction was a deliberate act? What if someone wanted to sabotage the reactor? Zara's eyes widened. Do you really think someone would do that? We can't rule it out, Max replied, the gravity of his words hanging in the air. If we're going to fix this, we need to consider all the possibilities. We can't just treat the symptoms, we need to get to the bottom of this. Quinn's fingers flew over the controls as he continued to scan for anomalies in the data. If we can isolate the fault, maybe we can prevent another incident in the future, he suggested, determination in his voice. Exactly, Max said, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Let's stay focused, and we'll get through this together. As the alarms rang out once more, echoing through the tight confines of the control room, Max felt a surge of hope. They were on the brink of something monumental, a revelation that could change everything. With his team by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next, determined to save the facility and everyone in it. Max's eyes flitted across the readings on the control panel, each one a potential clue to the mystery they were unraveling. As he worked, he felt a growing urgency. The deeper they delved into the data, the more he felt the pressure of time slipping away. The facility's heartbeat echoed in his ears, the rhythmic thrum of the machines, the shrill alarms, and the distant sounds of workers moving frantically through the halls. Zara, can you run a diagnostic on the coolant systems? Max asked, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. We need to make sure we have everything in order before we take the next step. On it, Zara replied, her fingers dancing over the keyboard with practiced ease. She had always been quick, but tonight, there was an urgency that pushed them all to perform at their best. Quinn was focused on the power distribution, scanning for any inconsistencies that might indicate a larger issue. I'm seeing fluctuations here, he said, his brow furrowing. It's not just random, it's almost like someone is trying to redirect the flow. Max felt a chill creep down his spine. Redirect? What are you suggesting? I don't know, it's as if someone is attempting to manipulate the power levels intentionally, Quinn said, his tone serious. Then we need to figure out who or what is behind it, Max said, feeling the tension in the air thicken. Let's keep this quiet for now. We can't afford any distractions. Just then, the lights flickered again, casting eerie shadows on the walls of the control room. The alarms, which had quieted for a moment, blared back to life, drowning out their voices. We don't have much time, Zara said, urgency creeping into her voice. Whatever is going on, it's escalating. Then let's make sure we're ready, Max replied. We need to stay focused and keep each other informed. Everyone's lives depend on our teamwork right now. As they continued to work, Max felt the bond between them solidifying. In such high-stakes situations, he realized how much he relied on his teammates. They were more than just co-workers, they were allies in a fight against an unseen threat. All right, let's regroup, Max said. Zara, any updates on the coolant systems? Still running diagnostics, but I'm seeing signs of irregularities, she replied, determination etched on her face. And Quinn, keep an eye on those power levels, Max instructed. If you see anything else out of the ordinary, let us know immediately. Will do, Quinn said, his focus unwavering. As they dug deeper into the data, Max felt a surge of adrenaline. They were detectives in a race against time, uncovering clues that could save the facility from disaster. The stakes had never been higher, and the pressure pushed them to their limits. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the corridor outside the control room. The three of them exchanged worried glances. What was that? Zara asked, fear creeping into her voice. Let's check it out, Max said, his voice steady. They needed to understand if the danger was external or part of the internal crisis they were facing. As they moved to the door, the alarms blared louder, and Max's heart raced. They were on the edge of discovery, and he knew they had to stay strong. With a deep breath, he opened the door, ready to face whatever awaited them, determined not to let anything stop them from saving their facility and everyone inside. Stay sharp, Max whispered as they stepped into the darkened corridor, ready for whatever lay ahead. The fate of their world depended on their courage and teamwork, and he was ready to fight for it. The control room was filled with a palpable tension that had been building for hours. Max Carter, the humble maintenance worker who had felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, stood at the center of the chaos. The alarms that had once blared in alarm were now a distant echo, a reminder of the harrowing moments they had just endured. The screens flickered with data and reports, each detail a testament to the struggle they had faced. As the dust began to settle, Max glanced around at his teammates. Zara, Quinn, and the rest of the crew were exhausted yet exhilarated. They had pulled through together, against all odds. It was a victory that felt hard-earned, and Max couldn't help but smile at the bond they had forged in the midst of crisis. "Did we just save the day?" Quinn asked, a grin breaking across his face as he wiped the sweat from his brow. "Looks like we did," Max replied, his heart swelling with pride. "I couldn't have done it without all of you." Zara nodded, her eyes sparkling with relief. "Who would have thought that digging through all that data would lead us to a tampered coolant line?" It was like a puzzle that had been waiting to be solved. As they exchanged stories about the stress and tension of the past few hours, Max felt a rush of gratitude. Each of them had played a crucial role in averting disaster, proving that even in the most dire situations, teamwork and determination could lead to remarkable outcomes. "Let's not forget the real heroes here," Max said, looking around at his team. This was a group effort. Everyone contributed, and that's what made the difference. He felt a sense of camaraderie that transcended the walls of the control room. They were more than just co-workers, they were a family forged in the fires of adversity. It was a feeling he wouldn't easily forget. Suddenly, the door swung open, and the facility's head engineer, a stern-looking woman named Dr. Elena Voss, strode in. Her presence commanded attention, and the room fell silent. "Team, I just received the report from the upper management. You all did an exceptional job today," she announced, a rare smile breaking through her normally stoic demeanor. Max felt a warm flush of pride at the recognition. "Thank you, Dr. Voss. We just did what needed to be done," he replied, trying to downplay the gravity of their actions. "Don't sell yourselves short," she said, her voice firm yet encouraging. "What you did today not only saved this facility but potentially prevented a catastrophe. The higher-ups want to acknowledge your efforts, and I believe you deserve it." Cheers erupted from the team, and Max felt their relief transform into a contagious energy. They had faced the unknown together, and now they would be celebrated for it. As the celebrations began, Max found himself reflecting on the day's events. The pressure, the fear, and the rush of adrenaline had all combined into an experience that had changed him. He had always considered himself a simple maintenance worker, but today he had been a hero. The realization was both humbling and empowering. In the midst of the laughter and excitement, Max caught Zara's eye. She approached him with a thoughtful expression. "Hey, Max. Can I talk to you for a second?" "Of course," he replied, stepping aside with her. "I just wanted to say, I've seen you grow so much over the years. You really stepped up today," she said earnestly. "Your calmness under pressure made all the difference." Max shrugged, trying to dismiss the compliment. "I just did what anyone would have done," he said, but Zara shook her head. "No, it was more than that. You inspired us to keep going, even when things looked bleak. You showed us what it means to lead," she replied, sincerity shining in her eyes. Her words resonated deeply within him. For so long, he had felt like a cog in the machine, but today, he had proven to himself that he was capable of so much more. "Thanks, Zara. That means a lot coming from you," he said, his voice filled with genuine appreciation. As the celebration continued, Max found himself surrounded by his colleagues. They exchanged stories, laughter, and high-fives, the air filled with a sense of achievement. The relief of having avoided disaster hung in the air, a sweet reminder that they were stronger together. "Let's make a promise," Quinn said, raising his glass. "No matter what happens in the future, we stick together. We face every challenge as a team." Agreed, the team cheered, glasses clinking together. The evening wore on, and as the celebrations began to wind down, Max took a moment to step outside for some fresh air. He leaned against the cool metal of the building, looking up at the stars twinkling above. The vastness of space reminded him of how small they were in the grand scheme of things, yet how significant their actions could be. It was a powerful moment of reflection. Max realized that their work at the facility wasn't just about maintaining machines, it was about the lives they impacted every day. They were part of something larger, a network of people and technology working in harmony to ensure safety and progress. When he returned inside, he found Dr. Voss speaking with the team. I'll be putting in a formal request for recognition for each of you. You deserve every bit of it, she said, her tone serious yet proud. Max felt a swell of gratitude. It was one thing to have done the work, but it was another to have it recognized. They had saved lives today, and they would be celebrated for it. As they prepared to leave for the night, Max's heart swelled with hope. He had stepped into a role he never knew he could fill, and it had changed him forever. He now understood that everyday heroes existed in ordinary jobs, and he felt proud to be one of them. Thanks for an amazing day, everyone, he said as they walked out together. I'm looking forward to what tomorrow brings. Me too, Zara replied, a smile on her face. As they stepped into the night, ready to take on whatever challenges awaited them, Max knew they would face them together. With a newfound sense of purpose, he took a deep breath, ready to embrace the adventures ahead. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. After all, the journey was just beginning, and the best was yet to come.